So I will kick off. Is anybody a fan of this film? So I replayed this video when I was building this deck, and he actually does emphasize, I will find you. Right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today is advanced searching of LinkedIn Recruiter. And of course, the last verb is recruit you. And I always like to tell people that obviously engaging people and recruiting people is much, much closer to you actually achieving your desired goal, which is hiring another person to your company. But you can't do that until you have found them in the first place. And so that's my little gotcha every single time. Sourcing and finding people is very important. Technically, you'd argue that it's the most important thing you can do because you can't recruit somebody you haven't found, you can't message somebody you haven't found, you can't network with someone that you haven't found. And some of you probably know this, but I verify with the LinkedIn team, the number one thing that people do with LinkedIn is search for and look at profiles globally. So my question to you is, wouldn't you want to be really, really good at that? You know, everybody in here is running searches on LinkedIn all the time, right? People that aren't here that have LinkedIn are running searches on LinkedIn all the time. And some of those people are looking for the same people that you are. It's something you have to be aware of. Sometimes it's so easy to be sitting at your desk or at home, wherever you work, and you're running searches and you don't realize there's other people looking for the same people you are. So although I don't want to say that there was any degree of deception with regard to the title of this session, but I'm actually not going to talk about Boolean too much at all, because I think that the most advanced way to leverage LinkedIn's vast stores of human capital data actually has very little to do, if anything, with Boolean. It has a lot more to do with your mind. And we'll take you down, hopefully, not such a trippy trip on how that works. So I'm not going to cover Boolean. You guys have probably seen a lot of that. There's actually videos from previous Talent Connects that are available online that you could watch. Some YouTube videos I've recorded of myself with LinkedIn, and I know LinkedIn does a very good job on their own of teaching people Boolean. So we're going to move beyond that and tell you that this is probably one of the most powerful quotes I've ever read, and I'm going to reference this several times during the presentation. Okay? And if you don't know who Deming is, you may want to know. He was a really smart dude. If you don't know how to ask the right question, you discover nothing. You guys realize that your searches are actually questions. They're queries. Most people don't draw the conclusion there, but every time that you're running a search on LinkedIn, you're really kind of asking a question of LinkedIn, and this is where I have a little fun and say, yeah, we're going to have a real conversation with LinkedIn. Do you have anyone that has this many years of experience with this type of education, has worked in this industry, has this type of experience? You're putting that into a Boolean search string, but what you're really doing is asking LinkedIn, do you have these people? And LinkedIn has those people. Do you guys know how many US profiles there are? You guys know the total number, right? 1.3. Over 93 million. It's actually over 100 million, so you got close. Who said? There you go. That is a good. I got a little, that was almost kind of like cocking a shotgun, I guess. Is that what you said? So there's actually over 100 million US profiles. Does anybody know, and this is a trick one because I think I'm probably the only person in the room that knows this, other than the US government, do you know what the non-farm employed number of people in the United States is? It's about 133, 134 million. So if you do some quick math and you take 100 million divided by 133, 134 million, you get 75% of the employed population of the United States is on LinkedIn. So it's kind of important to be able to sift through that data and ask the right questions. This is one of my favorite movies. This is from Inception. And what I want to convey upon you here is that, again, your limitations with searching LinkedIn really don't have much to do anything with Boolean logic. Your limitations are your own mind. Hopefully that's not too deep for you guys, but it really is. If you want to get really good at leveraging the 100 plus million people, if you're looking in the US, 300 plus million worldwide, you have to figure out how do I go in and get out information that I haven't already gotten. Because you guys are all running searches now, and some of you have been running searches for years. But my question to you is, what's different about the searches you ran last week, from the week before that, and the week before that? A lot of people don't realize they're running a lot of the same searches. So we're going to go back to the Deming quote, and we have to ask questions. Why do people join LinkedIn? Now, you don't have to jump out to the mics to answer that question. Does anybody want to yell it out? Why does the average person join LinkedIn? To network, right? It's to not look for a job. Some people do, but statistically, That's not the majority of the folks. The majority of people join it because it's a professional social network. So what does that mean about the information that they put into LinkedIn? What's that? It's not complete. Exactly. So most of them are not recreating their resumes. Why is that important? I'm hitting you with all kinds of good questions, right? Why is it important to understand that the average person is not going to have a resume level profile? It makes it harder to search. Why does it make it harder to search for and find them? Keywords aren't there. Have you been to previous sessions? It's true. This goes back to the whole inception thing. You start realizing, wow, there's lots of people on LinkedIn that I want to find and recruit, but I can't find and recruit them because they don't say the words that I think they should say because they're not resumes. Because they're not resumes, some people join with those minimalist profiles. I call them skeletal profiles. You know, you don't have to put in much information to be able to create a LinkedIn profile. Like 3 work experiences, titles, companies, and I'll show you some. But I honestly think that to get really good at sourcing on LinkedIn, you have to fully understand the people that are on LinkedIn in the first place, because they're the ones that are creating the data that you're trying to retrieve in the first place. If you don't understand LinkedIn users and what they're doing and why they do it and why they don't do certain things, how are you going to find them? So I'm going to keep quoting this until they come out with a different study, but this was a LinkedIn study of over 18,000 fully employed people in 26 countries, and it shows some really cool stats here. It shows that about 25% of people are actively and or casually looking, but that means that correspondingly 75% of the people are not really looking, but it doesn't mean they're not recruitable. What they're really showing here too is that 85% of all people on LinkedIn are technically open to an outreach from a recruiter, even if they're not actively looking. Some really good stats there. But that also means if you look on the bottom of that, those people are not creating very text-rich profiles, and they're hard to search for and find.
Probably lots of you have the same problem I do, which is software developers, designers, and all those technical people. And even going to my own software developers and asking them, hey, can you please get your profiles updated? They say absolutely no way, because recruiters will start calling me, so I'm not getting on there.
So that's actually from a LinkedIn event that I found this video online, and I've used this last year and I use it again because it's so powerful. Because this is a lady, I don't know, is she actually here? I never asked that last year. Maybe she could be in attendance. So do you guys know why somebody would want their people to actually put more information on their LinkedIn profile? But their own employees. So little branding, brand ambassadors, things like that, right? And so she's basically saying, look, I got people that don't want to update their profiles because of why? Because people like you are going to search for them and find them and send them messages, right? And they don't want to be bothered. But if you remember the previous slide, they actually don't mind being bothered. They're just not trying to be very easy to find. Some people don't do it on purpose, but it goes back to the previous slide. If you understand some LinkedIn users, some of them are on purpose trying to be unfindable. So the next thing we have to ask is, how does LinkedIn search work? Why do certain results come up to the top? Does anybody remember, and it wasn't too long ago, that you used to be able to sort your results? You can't do that anymore. Did anybody notice that? I forgot when I noticed it, but when I did, I was like, am I right? Has this gone away? Because I used to be able to search just by keywords or other things like that. I have found out, I don't know the entire secret sauce, because of course they wouldn't reveal that even to me, but largely LinkedIn search, like most search engines, is going to work on the number of mentions of the keywords that you're searching for. Can anybody tell me why that's actually very important to know? Exactly. Now, not necessarily the best results, best people. So why might the best people not be at the top? Exactly. You have to understand that about it. And I'll show you some fun stuff in a second. I'm actually going to show Wendy's profile later. Here's the other fun thing I always like to point out. This was from a real search of mine. I was actually helping a team look for chief architects. And I personally misspelled chief searching first. And it pulled 26,000 results of people misspelling chief. Now, I actually looked for chief architect, and I don't know if I want to tell you exactly how embarrassing the number actually was. Still pretty decent, the number of chief architects that were misspelled. However, it goes back to what I was saying before. Understand the average LinkedIn user. Do they really care about misspellings in a LinkedIn profile? Why would most people not even care? It's not their resume. They're not joining LinkedIn to find a job. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And the ones that aren't are going to fat finger some of their titles sometimes, and they're not going to care. And if you care, I think that's probably a bad decision on your part, because it's not their resume. Don't judge people on something like that, even if it's a chief architect. They can fat finger it. A couple fun things. I use a lot of IT examples. And for people that don't recruit IT, I am not trying to ostracize you guys from my content. Everything I'm going to talk about today has absolutely nothing to do with IT. I'm just going to use IT examples. You have to be able to translate them to what you're doing. Now, some of these are obviously, they were not on purpose, right? Somebody leaving out an I, who knows, maybe they did leave it out on purpose. The ENGR one is actually the most interesting to me because somebody tried to create some kind of a weird contraction of the word engineer, and there's lots of them. And they're not, some of them might do it on purpose and some of them might not do it on purpose. So whatever you're searching for, you're going to have to first think, how could somebody misspell this, number one? And number two, how could they otherwise represent what they think they're doing to people if they're not doing it for recruiters to find them? And I used this last year, and I always like this one. So you have to have the sudden moment of clarity. I'm a big meme fan, so this is a sudden moment of clarity. So even though have you guys ever taken a relatively complex search and asked somebody else to run it to see if there's differences in results? Okay. I've done it every once in a while, and I've compared my results to other people's, and the difference is minor. And again, maybe offline I can tell you about why I think that's the case, but largely your results are going to be somewhat the same. Some of it's determined by your behavior versus other searcher behavior, but the fact that I've done some testing with people that I really should have no affinity with and their results are largely the same, it means that if you guys are running the same types of searches, I don't care if they're basic or advanced, you're finding the same people that other people are hunting for the same people you are finding. If you could follow that. Right? Now, why is that a problem? Does anybody know why? What's that? Yeah, well, these people get a lot of in-mails, and so I'm actually plugging my own next session. It's on Wednesday. It's about how to get a higher response rate from your in-mails, because I think I've figured some cool stuff out there. But the people that come up to the top are always going to be at the top because of keyword relevance, right? And if everybody is going to be looking at those people, they get inundated with messages. But I'd argue that that's actually the tip of the iceberg. This is a concept I haven't really talked about too much recently, but I actually coined the phrase dark matter when it comes to results that are on LinkedIn. And so this is actually just a really cool image of a 3D dark matter map of the cosmos, right? So dark matter is stuff that scientists know is there, but they can't directly observe it. So I'm going to tell you that there's a concept of dark matter within inside of LinkedIn. It's results that you know are there, but you can't directly observe them because you're running searches to exclude them. So if anybody has questions about that, I'll show you a couple of examples. So again, it's an IT example, but I'm not alienating anybody who's non-IT. I'm just looking for people that don't mention words that I should be looking for because I want them to show up on a profile. But if I know first that some people are not going to put it on their profile, I actually have to run a query, and I'll show you much larger queries in a moment, where I actually ask LinkedIn, do you have people that probably do what I want but don't say it explicitly? And so in this case, I can find literally thousands of software engineers that don't mention any language, platform, SQL, database, anything on their profile. And I like to point out that that's 2,422 that work at Google alone, that don't say languages or the thing. And again, I don't care if you recruit for chefs or medical device professionals. There are people that don't say what you think they should. And it's counterintuitive because you're going to go in your intake meetings with your hiring managers and they're going to give you all these keywords to search for. And I'm telling you, you do that first, that's fine, but that's part of the population of LinkedIn. In fact, I'd argue it's probably less than 25% of LinkedIn. I'd say the remainder are the people that you're actually excluding now because they don't say the words that you think they should. But they could be the best people that LinkedIn has to offer. And that's what you have to understand. This is another aspect of dark matter, which is I usually ask the audience, I'm just going to tell you guys what every audience in the past has said, is that when you run a search and you get 500 or 1,000 results, how many do you typically look through? And most people tell me anywhere from like 50 to 150, and there's usually one or two people that say, I look at 200. And some of you might say, well, I look at all of them. And I'd say, actually, at some point, yeah, you might actually want to look at all of them. I would call that kind of talent mapping. Why wouldn't you want to say who are all the known people in this particular market or multiple locations that fit what I'd be looking for on a regular basis? But what I'm pointing out here is that if you're only looking at 10, 20, maybe % of who's up there, you're also leaving the rest of those people behind. And it doesn't mean they're not good. And as some gentleman over there pointed out before, some of the best people could be the people in the remainder of the results that you never look at. So something to be aware of. And so then I like to ask people, when you're searching LinkedIn, what are you trying to do? At a very basic level, you're probably trying to fill a job, right? Or maybe you're trying to fill a pipeline. But I'd argue that you and your talent acquisition team should take a step back and say, what are we really trying to achieve? And what do you think the best answer could possibly be? Yes, but there's a little trick to that too. You want to find the best people, right? And the best people may not look like the best people. You're not just trying to find some of the best people. You're trying to find all of the best people that LinkedIn has. Do you want to say, yeah, we found 10% of the best people on LinkedIn? Is that something you want to report back to your executives? Probably not. Wouldn't you like to say, we found all of the best people? It might take you 6 months to a year to do that, but I would say it's a worthy cause. And you can't really, I was actually really proud that I dug this up, because it's always cool to quote Sun Tzu, The Art of War. You have to have a strategy and you have to have tactics, because if your goal is to say, okay, Glenn, I'm going to take that back to my team and say I'm trying to find all of the best people, well, then the next follow-up question is going to be, how are you going to do that? Now that you have your strategy, find people we previously excluded, find people our competitors can't find because they're running searches that exclude them unknowingly, and then you have to come up with the tactics to be able to retrieve them. So this is a little bit of the money slide, because these are the tactics that can help you achieve your overall strategy if, in fact, you're trying to find all of the best people, not just the easiest to find. Most people unknowingly, when you run a search and you have keywords in it that are directly from your job description, you're finding the people that are easiest to find because they happen to be keyword rich, but that doesn't mean they're the best people that LinkedIn has. 100 million people in the US, it's a huge number. So I'll actually talk about all these through the next slides. And the slide deck will be available to everybody, and this is being recorded so you can re-review it. So there is no such thing as one search to find them all. I do like Lord of the Rings, so I try to put in these references, right? There is no one search that can find all people. It's actually impossible, because it will exclude people that don't mention the terms that you're searching for. But you can try. It's hard, but you can try. So I coined a phrase called maximum inclusion. You know, it's not the easiest thing to say, but I think it actually does a really good job of explaining what the concept is, which means I'm trying to include as many people who are highly likely to be the right person as possible and exclude as few as possible. So these are just a couple of examples of sales searches, top performing salespeople. We actually have substation engineer one over there in the upper right-hand corner, and just an interesting little, at least I think it's interesting, an analyst search. And instead of looking for each title spelled out in exact phrases, I just said, find me analyst with one of these types of things in there. So I'm looking for maximum inclusion so that I'm excluding the least number of people. And many people say, well, Glenn, I don't know all the ways that people could mention, you know, substation engineering or how they could be a top performer. And I tell people, I don't know either. When I start these things, I have no clue. The good news is I have a process that anybody here can follow, and I use it. I'm stealing this from a couple of good practices out there. It's an iterative search cycle. So let's say I got a job that came across my desk today, and the manager says they need to have cloud experience. And for you, it's whatever, fill in the blank. Okay? And you're like, well, I'm not really sure how many ways people might mention that they have cloud experience. So I'm going to run a search, and instead of looking for people, I'm just going to study the results. And whether you realize it or not, your brain is actually programmed to perform some pattern recognition. So when you look at results like this, and I won't walk you through step by step, but I type in the word cloud, and I get 5 to 10 results that I look at, and I'm looking for the non-highlighted terms that I can tell are probably related to cloud and relevant. And if you look at the screen up there, and for those who have no idea, you know, what the cloud is about, you can actually tell just by the way this person writes their profile that there's IaaS, PaaS, etc. You could probably pick out vCloud, OpenStack, CloudStack. This person is listing their cloud experience without saying it's cloud experience. So you take those terms and you run your search number 2, and you create a more inclusive search. This finds people that have cloud experience that may or may not necessarily say cloud. And then you do the same thing. You read a few profiles. This doesn't take long. It can take 5 minutes, it can take 30 minutes, but I'd argue that even if it took you 30 minutes, it's valuable because you're actually going to pull people out of the dark matter of LinkedIn and find people that you never found before. And you come up with a third search. So that to me is a little bit more maximum inclusion-y, right? I'm looking for, I don't know, 15, 20 different types of ways that people could talk about having cloud experience, right? And guess what? I got a lot of whole keyword-rich people. These people are dropping all kinds of cloud words all over their LinkedIn profiles. And we're gonna have a separate strategy to find the ones that only say it once later. But just wanted to show you that it works very well. And literally in 5 to 15 to 30 minutes, you can say, I don't even know what cloud is, to I know 20 different ways that somebody might represent cloud on their profile. Most people tend to look at the highlighted terms when you're looking at results. I'm asking you to look around the highlighted terms for other terms that the person is giving you big fat clues of, hey, this means cloud too. And before I did this, I didn't know eucalyptus was also related to cloud, or zookeeper, stuff like that. Like VPC is virtual private cloud. So now I'm going to jump in what I call implicit search, and this goes back to the Deming quote of ask the right questions. So this is when I was actually working with a recruiter who said, I'm having a hard time finding accountants in Dallas that have SAP experience. I think I found them all. Have you, either you yourself said that or had someone on your team that says, I found them all, I can't find any more, right? I'm always slightly amused when I hear that because, you know, again, we're talking about 100 million profiles just in the US for LinkedIn. That's like saying, I can't catch any more fish in the Pacific Ocean. I've caught them all, right? There's more people that you haven't found, I will guarantee you always. I can't find them all either because there's people that say weird stuff. They misspell things. They say things that I couldn't have anticipated. We'll show you some fun examples later. But I just want to talk through this example really, really quickly. So I went to LinkedIn and I asked it what I thought was an interesting question. LinkedIn, show me all the companies that employ accountants that have SAP. So that was my first search. Keyword, SAP, title of accountant. And what I did is I paid attention to all the current companies. And so I scraped them, put them in Excel, and I created a big fat OR statement of, I don't know, 45 companies in Dallas that I know employ accountants that use SAP. And then I went back and said, now show me the same people who are accountants that work at those companies that don't say SAP. You guys follow me? These are accountants that work for companies that I know for a fact use SAP because I've already looked at them all. And now I can look at 853 more results in Dallas when I thought I found them all. So that's just my example. You just have to think, how can I go back and find people that may not say what I hope that they'll say on their profile, but I'm pretty sure they have experience that they're looking for. And a lot of times it does come down to the companies. Another fun example here is, I love this when I first started doing it years ago, is simply look for software engineers that don't mention any languages or platforms or databases. And I did a real short one in this case, but one of my favorite functions of LinkedIn Recruiter is the any group search. Is anybody a big fan of that in here? Okay, but see, very few hands, right? So this is truly implicit search. I want you to understand the term. So I'm basically saying, LinkedIn, who's a software engineer that doesn't mention any languages, but I want a Java person. So what else might be on their profile that would imply that they have Java experience? Well, maybe a software engineer that's in a Java group, but does not mention Java on their profile, might be a Java developer, right? And you get hundreds of people in single cities that match that. Just a few more quick examples of, sometimes you have to take away the most obvious keyword. I do think in some of these cases it's not a mistake. Some of these people do it on purpose to be a little less easy to find. But there's thousands to tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people that have skills that, and the bottom one's fun too. It's like, these are people that never say the word cloud, but they talk about terms that imply that they have cloud experience. Almost 300,000 people in the US. And then something I really have fun with is what I call natural language or semantic search. So in this case, we're looking for people that have experience designing medical devices. Most people stick with sometimes very simple phrases, but they're usually not looking for phrases that include a verb. So I'm a huge fan of searching for verbs in addition to nouns, because nouns are just skills and verbs tell me what they've actually done. Sometimes that's an aha for folks. Most people I find don't search for verbs. So this is not super inclusive, but what's really fun is you can ask LinkedIn a question. It's almost like Go Fish. If you want to make it silly, stupid, and fun at the same time, it's almost like saying, hey, LinkedIn, do you have anybody that actually says medical device design or designing medical devices? And LinkedIn will be like, I got some people for you. Here they go. Give me their cards. And I'm like, well, it's nice. Look, this person says I have extensive experience designing medical devices, right? The other way we could do it on the bottom is instead of forcing it to be really restrictive, which it will be restrictive if you're looking for that medical device design, but we're going to look for them first and cherry pick them. The second one will be just, hey, if they say medical devices or medical device, and one of the ways of mentioning design is, remember, there's no root word searching in LinkedIn, so you're going to have to feed it every type, design, designs, designing, design. I love that first line. This person says, develop, design, and prototype and test new medical device concepts. That's exactly what I want. I'm searching for sentence level meaning. I'm not just looking for keywords somewhere in the profile. I'm looking for people that say in sentences, I do what you need me to do. And a part of that is by using verbs in addition to nouns. And this one I like to throw up just because this person in this experience from 2007 to 2010, in no place in this whole thing did they ever say the word medical device. They talk about designing, but how does this person, and this is a well filled out profile, this person is not trying to hide. But why does it never say medical device in there? What are they saying instead? What'd you say? So they talk about the FDA. What else? They actually mention the real products. They're not even thinking, hey, some recruiter's going to sit around and they're going to need me, and I better say medical device, because they may not realize that when I'm talking about these things, this zodiac thoracolumbar spinal fixation system, that is a medical device, right? But I'm telling you, this goes back to my previous slide. Understand LinkedIn users. This person is not trying to be hard to find. They're actually having a good time bragging about all of the medical devices they rolled out without ever saying medical device. So this is an example where I would take this and I would scrape all that kind of goodness out of there and put it into a big or statement for the concept search of medical devices. And then one thing that's very overlooked, I think, is that when you think that you're done finding all the people that are dead on, that say the words that you need, I'm telling you, you need to focus on that green circle. I call that indirect search. So again, pardon me, I'll use an IT reference. You need to use your own reference. But when you feel like you found all the people that look exactly right, what I find fascinating is so many people don't leverage LinkedIn for the power of social networking. You use it for recruiting, but you can use it for networking. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm looking for software engineers. And I feel like I've found all the software engineers in Austin, Texas that have exactly what I need. And maybe I've done that over months, and I actually have found pretty much all the people. Who works with software engineers directly? Project managers, analysts, testers, right? This applies to every one of the jobs that you're working on. The people you're looking for work for and with other people. And so you could on purpose run searches for the people that are not your direct match, but for people who work with them, and instead of in-mailing them or messaging them and saying, hey, I've got this job opportunity, you could say, I'm on the hunt for the best software engineer you've ever worked with. I would probably guarantee you that a software tester probably has some opinions about the quality of the software engineers they work with. I'm just telling you. Same thing for whatever you search for. So when you focus on your bullseye, that's cool, but keep in mind there's a whole bunch more people that can lead you to the right people that may not even be on LinkedIn by taking this method of indirect search. Another really good quote, we have to be able to learn how to see the invisible so that we can do what you guys think is impossible, so you guys can all do this. What I always like to walk people through is that when you see a profile like this, it looks like a resume, and none of us in here have a hard time saying, wow, I think that project manager, program manager is probably pretty good, because you can tell from the profile almost everything about them. And you can say, worked for good companies, done good work, I think they're a good fit. But then you have a hard time looking for people like this. Right? And as I've shown you already, the search that pulls up the person on the left cannot pull up the person on the right. One search can't find them all. You actually have to, in fact, does anybody have an understanding of how you could even pull up a profile that skeletal? There's a couple challenges there, right? So if you just search for project manager, yes, you could pull this up. How many project managers are in any major metro area? We're talking 100 million globally, so I'm telling you, you think there's not thousands, there's thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, right? You can only view how many results at a time? 1,000? So you do not want to run a super basic search to scoop up both of these people. You're actually going to exclude some of the terms that you use to pull up the person on the left. And sometimes you have to understand the right match. I love finding these things, and maybe I'm the only dork in the universe that does, but what I found when I was doing this presentation specifically, I found this one lady's profile who works at Intel, and in no place on her profile ever does she say the word software. But what does she say? SW. Now, I'm just telling you, my spidey sense here is telling me she did that on purpose. There's no way that somebody only abbreviates software every single time in their LinkedIn profile. It's kind of weird. And I don't mean that as a bad thing against her. I'm just saying it's kind of uncanny. Most people would at some point say the word software, but it says SW everywhere. So anybody that's searching for someone like that lady who mentions the word software, where does this lady go? Off into the dark matter. You guys understand that, right? She cannot be found by asking, hey, do you have any software people? It's going to be like, well, I do, but you didn't ask me for SW, so I'm only going to show you software. That's what LinkedIn does. And the mechatronics one, I always like to use this, came blast from my past. Mechatronics people, you don't even have to know what it is. Just keep in mind, not everybody that has mechatronics even mentions the word, but when you study profiles, it will allow you to say, wow, there's so many other things in this profile that I should be searching for other than the word mechatronics. And in fact, at some point, you should probably exclude it from your search and find the people who have mechatronics but don't say the word. And I always like to tell this story. This is a gentleman that I found many years ago. And I was recruiting for EMC. I needed someone with EMC experience. I felt like I had found all the people that explicitly mentioned EMC, so I ran the search on the bottom, and I excluded people who said EMC. But I knew that if someone had data center experience, like moves, consolidations, certain types of experience, that they probably had storage area networking, and they probably have EMC. It's implicit search. I couldn't guarantee it, but I said, hey, I'm going to run the search and do that. So I found this individual. I won't mention his name, but I'm very proud of him. And the job he took right after that was the one that I placed him on, and he's still there, thankfully. When I was building this deck, I'm like, I hope he hasn't left because I can keep using him as a story. So when I hired him to EMC back in 2006, he's obviously had a good career. But I love this story because this is a guy that no one else could find by saying and EMC, which was a required skill. I had to, on purpose, exclude the required skill, look for words that would lead me to believe that, hey, this person probably has it, so I'll take a gamble, and it paid off. So sometimes the best people don't even mention the things that your hiring managers are saying they must have. That's up to you to interpret that. So I always have some fun with these. You may have seen these. I am going to take credit for some of these approaches. So if you were looking for gender diversity, I forget what year somebody was like, well, gosh, how would I find women on LinkedIn? So I said, well, what would be, goes back to the Deming quote, ask the right questions and you'll discover things. What would be in a woman's profile that wouldn't be on a man's? So I said, I'll look up her or she. And I've used this many years. Does anybody know what this, where does her or she come up on a profile? Yes, it's interesting, right? And then you could look for other things like sorority, and it's like, not that some guy couldn't mention the word sorority in his profile, but probability is much higher than it's on a woman's. And then, and this is going to be in the deck that's distributed to everybody. I then said, well, and this goes to show you that this is a thought process, guys. This is not advanced Boolean search. This is what would be on a woman's profile that wouldn't be on a man's. Well, I'd probably say more often than not a woman's first name. Now you're going to have some false positives like Stacy and things like that. That's fine. But what I did is I went to the Census Bureau, I think, website. Anyway, I did like 6 decades. I looked at the top 100 most popular female names over 6 decades. I put them in an Excel file. I deduped them to 477 names. And I get a little drum roll here because I'm still impressed by this. This pulls up 35 million people in the US. And there's only approximately about 40 million women in the US on LinkedIn. So you're finding 80% of the women with one search. That's also called maximum inclusion. Now, I haven't got the other 20%, right? But 80% at a one pass, if you're looking for gender diversity, is pretty darn good. Now, that's not advanced Boolean. That's just thinking and asking the right question. What would be on this type of person's profile that I haven't already thought of? And then just some other examples of, these are real world examples of things that I've had to build in the past. You guys can take your guesses as to what they are, but it really doesn't have to, if you never look for these things, then don't worry about it. I'm challenging you to think, well, what is my goal and how can I construct a search to be maximally inclusive for what I'm searching for? In this case, it could be diversity, like historically black colleges and universities. or surnames. Active job seekers, I think there was a session on this at one point. There are active job seekers, and some people, you just ask the question, what would be on an active job seeker's profile that wouldn't be on someone who wasn't looking? And I didn't just make these off the top of my head. I actually put in one, and I follow my own process. I started looking at others and looked for other phrases that weren't highlighted, and I scraped together about 8 to 10. This is not complete. There's so many other things that people could say, but it does a pretty good job as a first pass of looking for people that are trying to tell the world, hey, I'm looking for something. I'm seeking a new opportunity. I'm available for those types of things. And I always like to throw this one up because I know it's important to many organizations. It should be important to all organizations. If you're looking for people that are in the military or transitioning to the military or military veterans, if you run a search for something like Army or Marines or Air Force or Navy or Coast Guard, you'll find actually just with that search about 1 million people. And that goes back to one of my earlier slides where I tell you all searches work. Deceptively, they work. But LinkedIn is not saying, you didn't ask me for all the people that I have that have military experience, either currently or former. You only asked for people that said one of 5 terms. So if you do that iterative process where you look at 5 to 10 profiles and you start looking for other terms, you can construct a maximally inclusive search like this that actually pulls up 2.6 million. So that's actually increased. So you can find 1.6 million more people than the 1 million people you'd find with a kind of a basic search. You may think that you're finding a lot of people with 1 million results in the US, but you're finding substantially fewer than are actually there. I always implore people, you have to have a text-rich and a text-poor strategy. Most people don't think this way, so I think if there's nothing else you gain from this session, this is the most important thing for you to take away. It's easy to find the people who have the keywords all over their profiles. It's not so easy to find the people that have what I call the text-poor LinkedIn profiles. You actually have to exclude terms to make them come up. And I have just some couple of basic examples how you do that. Now, these are local searches in the San Francisco area, and just to show you that you can have 13,500 results just in the Bay Area for text-rich profiles, but you also have 8,600 results in the same local area of people that are not in the first group. That's what we call mutual exclusion. They're mutually exclusive searches. There's no overlap. So that's another 8,600 people that I will guarantee you most recruiters are never finding. So even though, again, I'm using IT examples, all you have to do is translate the concept. It has nothing to do with the searches I'm running. It's the underlying concept of being able to reveal how can I pull up people who have the skills and experience I need, but they just don't explicitly mention what I think they should. Because guess what? You've already found the ones that are easy to find, and your competitors are also probably pretty good at finding the easy to find too. So I would argue that when you and your competitors are both using LinkedIn Recruiter, you better have a competitive advantage, which means you have to do something other people are not doing. Otherwise, you go back to the whole sudden moment of clarity, which hopefully you all now have. It's like, I'm finding the same people. I'm finding the same people as myself, as my team, and as my competitors. What's special about what you're doing? You can go back and make it special. So this is what I call talent mapping, which it goes back to the goal of, I want to find the best people. I want to find all of the best people, and I don't care if it takes me 6 months. How would you guys like to go back to your executives in either your organization or even to your whole company and say, we have literally mapped out all of the fill in the blanks in San Francisco, Dallas, and Atlanta? Do you think they would like that? If you could actually tell them what that talent pool looked like, knowing that LinkedIn is about 75% of the employed workforce in the United States, it's a very powerful talent mapping tool. The challenge comes in is that in many cases, you're going to get more than 1,000 results, and you can only review 1,000 at a time. The best way that I can tell you to systematically go through more than 1,000 is to simply use one of the coolest parts of LinkedIn. Again, I think it's the coolest. I don't know if anybody agrees with me. If anybody wants to hoot and holler about this, if they agree. But what I'm doing here is, as I process my, let's say it's 3,652 results, right? I'm not saying do this in a day. I'm saying you could make this a 6-month project with multiple people, by the way. It doesn't have to be a one-person show. So you go in and you add them to projects. As you identify them, add them to projects. Then you can go back to LinkedIn and say, show me people without projects in the past 3 months. What's that doing? It's mutual exclusion. It's saying, don't show me people I've already added to a project. So as I'm going through the almost 4,000 results, over time, we can just nice and cleanly, it's like, I've already seen them before. Please don't show me anybody that I've taken activity on or added to a project. Does everybody understand that? This is a very powerful way for you to really go back and say, I have found all of the blank professionals in these 3 cities that you asked me to. And we're going to systematically try to reach out to them on a regular basis using Talent Pipeline. And eventually the goal is to try to get in touch with all of them. Here's the probabilistic search. I actually really enjoy this. This is saying, if you're going to get a job description like this, and I wanted to put a nightmare one up here. I don't know if anybody that looks for cleared professionals. You probably have your own nightmare recs, right? Where the hiring manager says, here are all the required skills, and oh, by the way, I'd really like if they had all these other super tough things as well. What many recruiters do, unfortunately, though, is they'll say, I'm so glad that I don't have to look for the desired skills because they're not required. But I would take a different mindset. This is where you look differently at LinkedIn, in my opinion. You could run a search for the basic qualifications, the BQs, and you would find 950 people. Now, you might say, wow, 950 people, right? But I would tell you that you should go back and go fish with LinkedIn. You should go back and say, LinkedIn, do you have the perfect person? Which is asking for everything, including the more years of experience, the higher degree, the higher clearance, and more skills. And LinkedIn, in many cases, will tell you, I've got 12. But what I like to show you is that those 12 were the 950. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't look through all 950 because you don't have the time to do it within a day or a week or 2 weeks, why wouldn't you ask for the needle in the haystack? It's like go fish. LinkedIn, do you have somebody with, I don't read the whole thing out because there's a lot going on there, but basically what I said in the bottom, that's what you're asking the question for. And the TSSCI, and an MS or a PhD, and 10 plus years, 12 people. And when I talk about a search progression, what I'd like to point out is your first search, in my opinion, now some people would tell you that they would like to start broad. I would much rather you not start broad. I'd rather you start specific because your goal is to get the needle. If the needle exists, why not find it first? So the first search is everything. And then the second search, you can start systematically excluding some of those desired skills that you didn't need anyway because they were preferred. And so with each successive search, you find nice little bite-sized chunks that you can process. So instead of looking at 950 and only processing them based on the keyword relevance, you can get 12, 16, 6, 2, 6. It's very easy to perform. And you can keep going further. And your last search technically would be just for the BQs and excluding all of the required skills. And so I call that a search progression. And you never see the same candidate twice. It's a nice, clean way to process a large result set. And the other thing I like to point out is anybody using custom fields? Yeah. Some people don't even know it exists. You should probably talk to your LinkedIn rep. But custom fields are interesting because they had custom fields for a while, at least the ones like willing to relocate, work authorization, expected salary, availability date. To me, those things are powerful. You can actually create your own now. So this goes back to my inception slide. The limitation is only your own mind. And the reason why I consider this to be advanced searching is because if you have corresponded with someone that you found and you've learned something else about them beyond their profile, you're going to want to leverage custom fields so you can quickly and instantaneously pull them back. So let's say you're for a project manager and the most you can pay is $100K, and you come across a lady who's saying minimum I'll take is $120. Now you know at some point you'll probably be able to afford her for a different position, right? So you could put her in an appropriate project, but if you just started leveraging some of these custom fields, you could then go back to LinkedIn later and say, have I ever corresponded with a project manager who would accept $120K? And LinkedIn will say, yeah, you left me the clue behind because you used the custom field. So custom fields is something you have to use. And I don't know if anyone's going to get this reference. I was actually going to title it something differently. So if anybody knows what I'm talking about here, you can shout it out. So let's say I get 1,000 results. In this case, I get 1,015. So there's 15 beyond the veil, right? I can get to 1,000, but 15 are going to be left behind. But if I'm looking for mechanical engineers in a particular area, by the way, this is in the Bay Area, that have MATLAB, instead of starting with the people who have the most keyword-rich profiles, I can flip it to the bottom, so I can start from the bottom. Some people are familiar with that song, right? Because I actually had a training class one time, and I said, who starts from the bottom? And one guy said, Drake. And I said, this is a true story. And at the time, I'd never heard the song, and I didn't say anything. I didn't act like I didn't know what he was talking about. So I just let it go, and then I looked it up later, and I actually like the song now, so it's on my iTunes account. That's a true story. So this is Drake style. So if you know everybody starts from the top, why wouldn't you start from the bottom? And I just want to show you, I can't engineer these things, no pun intended. I flipped to the last result. So the 1,000th result is Jackie, Boo, Rose. All right? Okay, so even if you don't look for mechanical engineers, how valuable do you think she is? She's very valuable for a number of reasons, where she works, who she is, the fact that she likes to go by Boo. That's pretty interesting, right? But she actually has not many connections, which is fine, but she's result number 1,000. You already know, most of you don't look to 1,000 anyway, so I'm asking you to sometimes say, you know what, I'm gonna flip it over and I'm gonna start from the bottom. How many in-mails do you think Jackie gets? Probably not as many as the person who starts up at the top. These are all things that I tell you when I started off by saying advanced search has more to do with the way you think than the Boolean part. That's what I mean. How can you leverage LinkedIn to find people, and not only just find people, but perhaps even better engage them, get higher response rates from people who aren't at the top all the time? Does anybody like to take advantage of the as they join feature? Oh, I see a few. Hopefully there's been a lot of ahas during the session, I hope. This is huge, right? Another way to look at it. Let's say I'm looking for mechanical design engineers or whatever it is you're looking for, and you can't get a search agent where it will actually notify you, but you can, run the search, save it, and then look for new results. So if there's 8 people who just joined LinkedIn that match your search, what would you want to do with them? Yes, and you could say, welcome to LinkedIn. I see you just joined, right? That could be pretty cool. That's like saying welcome to the neighborhood. It's actually kind of nice. Here's a plate of cookies. Welcome to LinkedIn. By the way, I would like to recruit you today, tomorrow, or sometime in the future when the time is right for you. But you'll probably get a higher response rate anyway because this person just literally walked on the street. They moved into your block. So very, very powerful way to leverage that. Lots of people don't. I would stay on top of the core skill sets that you're always looking for. Look for the people that just became your neighbor on the street and welcome them. So here are the key takeaways, and we're going to have some time for you guys to ask questions. Remember, if you have questions, you might want to start filing out to the sides where you can look at the mics, but these are your takeaways, okay? So first, you have to have a goal, and I know that many of you, and this is not, I'm not meaning this in a negative way, but you probably don't have a goal beyond, I've got to fill these positions. Some of you are beyond that, and you're on like Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's like, I just got to fill my freaking jobs. Then above that is, maybe I want to develop a pipeline, because that's kind of above that, because I'm filling my jobs, and you're going to move up the hierarchy, right? I know how it is. You get 30 or 40 jobs in your queue, and you're like, dude, I can't worry about anything other than filling my freaking jobs, right? But you have to have goals. Somebody on the team should have goals to find all of the best people. And I will tell you that if you were able to tell your leaders, hey, if I had some more time, or if you lessened my workload, or we hired more people, we could map out all of the people that we want to attract and hire. Some people are going to say, okay, because they're going to see the value proposition in that beyond just filling the jobs of today. So first you have to develop your goals. Then I would argue that once you have your goals, you have to figure out what is your strategy and the number of tactics that you have to achieve those goals. I gave you a laundry list of them. If you go back to that one slide with the little, the blue background and the little gold flakes, those are the tactics that you can employ to be able to uncover people that you're currently excluding, people that your competitors aren't currently finding, right? And some of the best people that just don't look like the best people, because you now understand most people on LinkedIn don't have fully filled out profiles, which means they're keyword poor. And sometimes they're not saying the keyword that you think is most important, and so you're always excluding them unknowingly. Now, hopefully I've ruined you and you've gone back and you're like, I'm excluding so many people in my current searches, I gotta rethink, which you do, honestly. And you'll find sometimes 2 to 3 times more people than you thought existed on LinkedIn, which is the true power. I mean, LinkedIn has the data. It's not LinkedIn anymore. I'm not even sure if they're at a critical mass yet. They probably haven't even gotten there yet. But when you have 75 to 80% of the employed population of the United States, the challenge is actually you and your ability to discover them and filter through. It's almost kind of like a big data problem. It's not big data because it doesn't fit the big data definition. But the challenges associated with big data, for anyone who's aware, it's not the data, it's the ability to ask the right questions to get the insight from the data. And the insights for you are the best people. I'm challenging you to commit to mastery. You're going to have to practice, 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 doing things like I've showed you today. That will be uncomfortable in the beginning because they don't make a lot of sense and it'll be new to you. But the more you practice, the better you'll get. It's amazing how that works, right? Visualize success. What I mean here is think of what your target profile could look like, both with a lot of text and also with minimal text. That's what allowed me to figure out how, if I needed a real strong gender diversity program and I'm sourcing for gender diversity, that's what led me to come up with that answer. I wasn't some guy who sat around and said, ding, I have the answer off the top of my head. It actually took me a little while to figure that out. But it's that constant questioning of how could I find women on LinkedIn instead of men, and what would be unique about their profile? And you start thinking what's on the profile, and then now, of course, you know, it's like, well, duh, but at a point, I was not thinking first names. But you probably didn't even realize that LinkedIn search fields can handle that many terms, and they can. So throw everything you've got at it. And of course, think and experiment. So I'm going to close out with this. It's a Malcolm Gladwell. I enjoy a lot of his books and his thought process. And I like to point out that this is a good quote because it says, hey, in cognitively demanding fields, there are no naturals. So I'm not a natural at this. I was not a natural at this. When I first sat down at my recruiting desk in 1997, I didn't have any of the answers. I just relentlessly pursued finding answers. And when I ran into a roadblock, I said, this can't be it. I'm going to find other ways to find these people because I know they exist somewhere. So I kind of believed in the concept of dark matter, and then I went searching for it. But what I'm asking you to do is that if some of you feel like, gosh, this guy's figured this stuff out, the good news is maybe I have figured it out, but I just showed you all. So now you have the ability to go back and apply the same types of principles because they're repeatable. I'm actually taking what some people would consider to be an art, and I'm turning it into a science, which is a process that you guys can follow. So just remember, if you feel like, hey, this is over your head, it's actually not over your head. You just have to practice. And you all learn by doing, so you just have to jump in and start to think and experiment. And you'll be surprised at the additional people that you can pull out of LinkedIn that were always there. You just weren't asking the right questions, which essentially are your searches in the first place. So I just got a 10-minute warning, which means we have 10 minutes for questions, which this, by the way, you may not realize it is a historic moment because I usually try to share so much information in my sessions that I go all the way to the end and then nobody gets asked questions. That's a true story. So now I, on purpose, tried to make sure I got through all the content so that if anybody has any burning questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. Now remember, they're filming this, so I hate to say that. They do have some roaming mics, but it's much easier to go to the stands because for people who are going to watch the video later, they want to hear the question. Although for right now, if you want me to, I'll try to repeat it for you. So you raised your hand. You did have a question? Yes, the question was, will the presentation be online and accessible? It will be. And the recording of this will also be available online. And I think the recording from last year's, which has some similar core concepts, but is a different presentation, you can also find that on YouTube under LinkedIn. So a lot of information available. Yes? Question up front. Good question. In past years, I've talked about industries. She wants to know, is there value in using the industry filters? I would say yes and no. You have to understand, it goes back to that key slide. Why would someone, okay, let's say I'm a software engineer and I'm working at Pfizer. What industry do I choose? It could be a lot. There's computer science, there's so many different ones, or they could choose pharmaceutical. I've usually done this fun little study in the past. I will look at people who currently work at AT&T, and then I'll just look at the top 10 filters for industry, and you realize that, yes, a lot of them choose telecom, but a good chunk of them don't. I think it was 70-30. So 70% of the people at AT&T say they work at a telecom company, 30% don't say it at all. So when you leverage that filter, just keep in mind, it may not be accurate because people have to make a choice as to what they do. And they might choose the industry of their company, or they might choose the industry that they think they're in. What if they're a graphic designer at AT&T? Do they think that they're in telecommunications, or do they think they're in graphic design? You have to worry about these things. And if you don't, then it's funny too. You'll find some, but you actually unknowingly have excluded qualified people. So very good question. It's helpful to use the filters, but you have to be very aware of it. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, I'll repeat the questions. So she's asking about similar profiles and people also viewed. I find them curious. The problem is when you're trying to look for people in a specific location, it doesn't limit it to people in a specific location. So I might be looking in San Francisco, and I might find a profile that somebody also viewed, but that person's in Philadelphia. Now, for some skills, you may not care where they are in the US because they're so rare that you can pull people in, and that's a very good thing. I found it helpful in that regard, but I'm a little bit of a nut. I'm a control freak. So when I'm looking for people in San Francisco, I want to personally bottom out San Francisco first before I start looking at other profiles that people have said similar profiles. But have you guys seen, there was something posted on LinkedIn not too long ago that in your projects, you're going to get some really cool search and match functionality? I'm not fully qualified to talk about it because only LinkedIn knows exactly how it's going to work. But there was a post, I think it was on LinkedIn's blog, where they were talking about how in your projects, it's going to start taking into consideration the searches you ran and the profiles you put in the project. And it's going to start matching on a lot of different variables, not just some, but many. And so it's going to be a similar functionality to similar profiles, but it's going to be that on steroids in your projects, which I think is brilliant. Because I've been waiting for a while for LinkedIn to start working on additional advanced search functionality, and this may be the beginning of it. And that was published online. I'm waiting to see it when it comes live, but that's going to be, as long as they keep the location as something you can control, because if I only want to look at local candidates, I could care less if the person's in Ottawa, Canada. If I can't relocate them, then they're of no value to me. But it could be a good way to learn the words off the profiles, because that's that iterative search I was talking about. You're always going to want to study profiles, and if you look at a profile and you're not just, please don't look at a profile ever again and only assess them for a match. You need to look at them as a potential match, as well as a potential place to harvest additional titles and keywords and industry terms that these other people that you're trying to hunt, you could take it and fold it into your search and make it so much better and more inclusive. So I like those functions, but that one limitation on the location, I'm just a nut. And I hate if I'm looking at Atlanta and all of a sudden I get somebody from San Francisco. It just annoys me. I'm a little bit of a purist. Good questions. Any other questions? I know we have like probably 3 minutes left. No burning questions? Shoot. Yep. 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 Okay, that's a really interesting question that somebody asked me just last week on my own team. So I have one idea for you. So she said, hey, if I need somebody with a certain number of years of experience, like 3 to 5, and my competitors are typically looking for people with 3 to 5, you're going to use the years of experience facet and find people with 3 to 5. Now, we're going to go back to the whole Inception. I think that was Paris in the Inception slide where he was folding the city on itself. We're going to kind of bend things for a moment and just realize, is that facet always accurate? Now, why can't it not be perfectly accurate? It's user-generated information. I've found people that look like they have less than 3 years of experience, but they're a vice president. Now, what does that mean? What happened for that profile? They didn't enter all their years of experience. So the filter is only as good as the information that's there. But another way that you could try to leverage that information is you could use the not operator to exclude. And this goes back to what would a profile, actually I'll challenge you. I gave you half the answer. I hate that. What would be on a 3 to 5 year person's profile that wouldn't be on someone who had 6 or more years of profile experience? It's true, that was something that came up, that someone says, hey, people that have less experience typically will leave more educational things on there, like a GPA. Okay, good thought. What could not be on someone who has 6 or more years of experience? What could not be on their profile? Dates of employment prior to that. So you can actually ask LinkedIn, please don't show me people who mention the year range that you're looking for. Has anybody ever done that? I've had to do that. It's really interesting because you're like, look, if I need 3 years of experience, it's 2014, you're going to have to go back and say, I don't want to see anybody that's actually had any work experience in the early 2000s or in the 1990s. Yeah, it does just in the keyword field. You're just basically saying you can't show me those dates. It doesn't work in that facet, but you can ask that question. Hey, have you found these profiles, but they just can't say these years? And just put them, or 2000 can kind of get messed up with like certain types of versions of software. But you could say, not 2001 or 2002, like and not parentheses or close parentheses. Just experiment with that. That's one of the only other ways to get around that. Yep. And I think we're probably at time. Yep. Did you guys find this helpful? Is it good? Okay.